I close my eyes and see myself as a little girl living in the former Soviet Union, mesmerized by the bedtime stories that my grandmother, Babula as I call her, is sharing about her distant childhood. Zelda is born a lifetime ago, in July of 1924. These are very unsettling times, right after the Communist Revolution. The world recuperates from the Great War. Zelda's mother died when she was just 3 years old in childbirth. My grandmother and her two sisters are raised by her loving yet forever exhausted father, who is working round the clock to feed his three little motherless daughters. Only now, as an adult, I understand that these were years of hunger and poverty. Yet, somehow, these bedtime stories are about lively adventures of three energetic sisters. I particularly love the story about my great-grandfather, David, Zelda's father, coming home from work and telling bedtime fairy tale stories to his own daughters. David is working 16-hour shifts in a grocery store, falling asleep in the middle of every story from exhaustion while dreaming of his workday. My grandmother makes an exaggerated masculine voice. Papa would say, "Oh yes, and the Red Riding Hood went to see her grandmother to bring her food. And, well, how much is for the rice?" I'm looking at Zelda, giggling innocently, wanting more impersonations. Zelda laughs along, making sure to sound joyous and silly. She's never tired of entertaining me. And three of us scream, "Papa, Papa, what rice? You were telling us about the Red Riding Hood." And Papa would wake up and start, "Yes, yes, I'm sorry, you're right. Yes, the Red Riding Hood." And the wolf would say, "To the Red Riding Hood." And then, "Yes, take my 3 rubles for the loaf of bread." I'm rolling with laughter. "David, your papa is dozing off again. He's confusing everything." I laugh and laugh. Why can't he just stay awake and finish the story? How silly is my great-grandfather? Zelda often repeats the story of a little boy sitting on the stoop in the neighborhood. The boy is covered in lice, begging for food. I feel her heart racing as she remembers. I run inside the house yelling, "Papa, Papa, I want to give the ration of bread to this child outside." Papa knows not to stop me, even with the explanation of my own hunger. I snatch a piece of bread and storm into the streets. When I walk up to the boy, he grabs the bread with both hands, stuffing it into his mouth. He is so hungry and weak. There's always a long pause after the story. Zelda is reliving this incident again and again. I feel sad for the hungry boy. I want to know what happened to him. I ask for my grandmother's reassurance that the boy survived. However, this ending is different. Unlike her own life, she doesn't sugarcoat the suffering of others. "I don't know what happened, my sweet child," she says, looking dazed. "I wish I could do more for that boy. I wish I could do more." Zelda never throws away food. She recycles, reuses, and refreezes. Food is sacred. She bakes croutons out of stale bread and tells me that if I was to hold a piece of a toast in my bread for a long time, it would swell up and seem bigger in size. That's a silly idea. Why would I do that, I wonder? Why would anyone not just have more croutons if they're hungry? I ask. Zelda blinks away the memories and puts more croutons in my plate. "Eat, my child. Have as much as you want. You're right. That's silly. No reason to hold it in your mouth." As I crawl next to my grandmother in her huge bed, I beg for more stories. I think I was 6 or 7 years old now. And the memory of her whispering into my ear is incredibly sweet. It has been 60 years since this story. And this is a dance story, as I called it. Zelda fixes my blanket and begins. My sisters and I were about 15. All 3 of us sharing one fancy dress, taking turns going out dancing. One time, a boy invites me to dance, thinking that I am my older sister. He insists I dance waltz with him, as my older sister did a day before. I was so embarrassed because I didn't know how to twirl in waltz, so I thought about it for a while and decided to run away. I lay in the dark, smiling, thinking about this silly incident, imagining my grandmother running away. Grandma, why wouldn't you just have your own dress so that nobody would ever get confused? You definitely needed separate clothes, I advised her. I can't see her eyes in the dark room. She's silent for a long time. Perhaps she's falling asleep, I think to myself. Later in life, Zelda becomes a doctor, saving countless lives. She marries and has 2 daughters. Then, at 34, she suddenly becomes a widow as her husband dies in a horrific drowning accident. A year after, her 8-year-old youngest daughter, my aunt, falls off the slide and becomes handicapped. A motherless widow with a very sick child, she continues to march on through her personal obstacle course. Zelda spends 12 years of her life saving her young daughter's life. Yet, despite the unimaginable struggles, her spirit remains unbroken. Almost every picture I have of my Babula is the one of her feeding someone, cooking, smiling, singing, hugging, dancing, or laughing with her entire being. Perhaps this incredible zest for life is making it possible to survive all of the unimaginable challenges. After immigrating to the United States in 1989, Babula cannot stop praising this beautiful country. Zelda, after all, is the biggest patriot of the land. She gets to her senior years and she loves, loves, loves dressing up and wearing hats. Perhaps that night, a long time ago, she heard my advice, and half a century after the waltz incident, she decides to significantly upgrade her wardrobe. She's never tired of dressing up. After all, it's never too late to get fancy. She's extravagant, loud, and incredibly positive. She dresses up her body and soul into a colorful rainbow of joy and gratitude. Her last breath is not wasted on anything but giving, loving, transcending the narrative of her past. Zelda died suddenly from the natural causes in the late afternoon of May 6, 2020. As the pandemic creeps upon the entire world, some might say that a death of a 95-year-old woman may not really be called sudden. After all, at some point, death is no longer an unforeseen phenomenon, but a natural occurrence. Yet, a lifetime of wisdom cannot prepare me for the loss of my grandmother, whose vibrant spirit transcends her actual years on this earth. How can a heart so broken and so resilient just simply stop beating? Before I fall asleep, I imagine my grandmother, Babula, stroking my hair, telling me to learn to narrate my own life with positivity and gratitude. I hear her voice reassuring me that all the memories and experiences that we have accumulated along the way can be rechanneled into a vehicle of light and kindness. Yes, I know, I imagine whispering into the night. I miss her vibrant presence in my life, yet in some odd way, she's more with me now than ever before. I feel her reassuring me in a cheerful voice. Yes, of course I'm here. I'm always here with you, my child. We're all part of one big tapestry of experiences, people, and stories. And now, it's your turn to add your narrative into a collective book of human destiny.